Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Good morning. So wonderful to have everyone
Shabbat
here this
Shalom.
Shabbat of Martin Luther King weekend. Let me frame our conversation this morning in the following way. My friend and colleague Michelle will often say about sermons that a rabbi should write and deliver a sermon that they need to hear. And in that spirit, this is a class that I need to hear. So I just want to frame this in the following way. On any given day, I'll look at the world and the news of the world, and it's just so hard. In all the ways that you don't need me to. You read the same newspapers, and it's Martin Luther King weekend, and Dr. King would inspire us to work and to grow and to contribute and to change the world. And instead, and I'm not proud of it, but this is just real. The question in our home is what Netflix series that we haven't already watched in the last 2 years should we watch? Thursday night, we were so desperate. We finished season 3 of Virgin River. And I've been wrestling with this question of responding to the brokenness of the world by retreating from the brokenness of the world and by just watching Virgin River series 3, season 3, and thinking, what is the spiritual valence of that? And then last week, at a Hartman lecture that was taught by a rabbi and Dr. Lila Kashdan, she brought a source which was Oliver Sacks, who was the neurology professor at NYU Medical School, as a neurologist, a scientist, a historian, a naturalist, a teacher. And when he was dying in 2015, he published a series of articles in the New York Times. And Rabbi Kashdan brought this piece from Rabbi Sacks called My Own Life, and it contained 2 paragraphs that just really located the problem that I was having with Netflix in year 3 of the pandemic. So we'll jump off with that, but first we're going to begin by thanking God for the gift of learning Torah together. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Fa'arev na Adonai Eloheinu et divrei Toratcha b'finu, u'b'fi amcha beit Yisrael, v'nihya anachnu v'tzatza'enu v'tzatza'ei amcha beit Yisrael, kulanu yodei shemecha v'lomdei Toratecha lishma, Baruch atah Adonai hamalamed Torah la'amo Yisrael, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim, v'natan lanu et Torato, Baruch atah Adonai noten ha'torah. So Oliver Sacks writes this piece in February of 2015. He will pass away in August of 2015. So he's in the last several months of his life. And he writes the following, which will be our point of departure for this issue of detachment, and that's the word that he uses. I'll just read it. I feel a sudden, clear focus and perspective. There is no time for anything inessential. I must focus on myself, my work, and my friends. I shall no longer look at NewsHour every night. I shall no longer pay any attention to politics or to arguments about global warming. This is not indifference, but detachment. I still care deeply about the Middle East, about global warming, about growing inequality, but these are no longer my business. They belong to the future. I rejoice when I meet gifted young people, even the one who biopsied and diagnosed my metastases. I feel the future is in good hands. So colleagues, first, let's just look at this and examine the pshat, this statement in its own context. What is he saying? What's motivating what he's saying? And how do you react to it, this notion of detachment? Mr. Nesson.
So this is so Jewish because you can read this 2 different ways. One, the sense of detachment that he mentions is so real to so many people as they get older, and they say, I really can't do anything anymore. I'm still concerned, but I really can't do anything anymore. And then I was also thinking of, is this really a good Jewish move or not? because we have the idea that our goal is to plant a tree for the next generation. And I think what he's done here is that he's already planted the tree for the next generation, but we're also not supposed to desist from the work. So in a certain sense, the resignation I don't love, but the sense that he has done, he feels that he's done everything that he can, is also a beautiful move at the same time. So it's a simultaneity of two beautiful Jewish moves.
Yeah, I actually have to agree with you somewhat, Dan. I
Oh my God.
love that. I love this text. I mean, I understand the context in which you're bringing it, and there is something about before the end of our life when we give up and turn it over and detach that's problematic. But it feels to me like this is the goal of all of our lives, a life well lived where you can look back at what you have done and say, I did my part, I played my role, and now I'm confident in the next generation that they can carry it on. And so to me, until we started to speak about it, it didn't strike off the detachment alarm bells,
Well,
because
he
it
uses the
feels
word.
but it feels appropriately detached for your
Right.
final days.
So he's detaching. He uses the word detachment. He says he doesn't watch the
Right.
news. He says he doesn't talk about politics. He says he doesn't have arguments about global warming. He's
Right.
focusing on myself, my work,
Yeah.
and my friends.
And that feels totally problematic when you pull it back in the lifeline,
Right.
as so many of us have.
Right.
But at his phase, it speaks to me of
So-
the kind of peace that I could only hope to attain.
Okay, so I'm trying to, in other words, you're saying that in the context of a dying man, he's a dying man. He has months to live. He writes this in February. He dies in August. That's a wholly appropriate move, and it's well-earned detachment, right? He doesn't have to watch the news and talk politics anymore. He's done his thing. He's made his move, and he has tagged the future, and now he gets to look inward. And I guess the question that this raises for me, and want to hear from Elisa and Elias, is, what if you're not dying? What if you're just sapped? What if you're not dying? What if you're just depressed? What if you're not dying? What if you're just demoralized? What if you're not dying? What if you're just beaten down? What if you're not dying? What if you're just crushed? What if you're not dying? What if you just don't have anything in the emotional cupboard right now? If it's okay when you're dying, is it okay when you're sapped? And of course, it's Dr. King weekend, and we're hearing his voice too. Elisa, what is your response to all this?
I feel deeply caught because I believe very strongly that none of us are entitled to be sapped enough that we can't care about what's going on around us. That I hear, he's dying, but there's also part of me that's like, okay, but you're writing this article for the New York Times to share your story. You're not just concerning yourself with your own life and your own friends and your own experience. You're actually very consciously sharing your story and very consciously writing about the experience of dying and preparing to die for other people, to help other people. And so he's not caring about this issue or that issue. He is caring about providing information, providing wisdom from near to the other side. And I think that we have a false narrative that when we're sapped, the answer is to do nothing or to do less. And often the most incredible way to rejuvenate, to find more energy, to find more purpose, is to help other people.
Elias.
So I want to start by saying a few things that were ignored today. So one is that this separation that we have now among us brings me closer to the camera. So on one hand, could show my socks in a better way. On the other hand, makes my head much bigger than it really is. So I'm not so sure I like this. Maybe we should switch places. And one more thing I need to say is that, usually when we have a big Shabbat in terms of music like today, I usually take good care of myself, my voice, the weather, trying not to catch a cold. And then you come an hour early to Shabbat morning services to do Talmud class, and the place is freezing. And then everything goes through the window. Anyways.
There's a blanket. I can give you a blanket.
That's right. Thank you. So fascinating point, Wes. I like the first take that Michelle had about in a way, who are we to judge somebody who decides to end his life in his own way? I mean, we don't know how we are going to be acting eventually, in our own time. One more thing, and then related to what you, Alisa, said, sometimes you find more peace when you do nothing. And you get more at peace when you are, how many people say, okay, I just want to go to the beach and relax and do nothing and detach from everything, or go to the, I don't know, fishing, like you do that. I don't know anybody else who does that. And anyways, to detach from the world. And you can find peace in doing that. I'm not so sure, this idea that we always have to be doing something because it's our responsibility. A society is composed of individuals, and individuals have the right to decide on their own. And in relationship with you are asking, Wes, we all feel like that at this point in the middle of the pandemic.
So what I want to do is bring a Jewish lens to this. Oliver Sacks himself is Jewish. By the way, he wrote a lovely piece about lighting Shabbat candles, etc. But I want to ask, what do our sources say about detach and go fishing, or detach and go to the beach, or detach and watch Virgin River season 4 now? Because you're because you're sapped.
I watched
and
Dexter.
so I want to do is look. I'm just going to read. This is from. So actually, there's a portion in Deuteronomy that many people never encounter because we read it in August, and people are in other places in August. This is the end of Deuteronomy. It's Vayelech. So I'm gonna read it. Moses went and spoke these things to all Israel. He said to them, "I am now 120 years old. I can no longer be active." Now, it's often said that reading in translation is like kissing through a veil. It's evocative of the real thing, but it's not the real thing. And I think that this translation misses the real thing. It's translated as "I can no longer be active." What he actually says is, Ben Mea ve'esrim shana anochi hayom, I'm 120 years, lo uchal od latzet v'lavo, which I think has much more pathos. I'm no longer able to go out or come in. What it's speaking to is that state when our physicality is so limited that getting up and getting out is its simus. Getting back, sitting down is its simus. Moving from one state to another state, from standing to sitting, is its simus. Moving from inside to outside is its simus. And I think what he's talking about is I'm at that end when my world is getting smaller because I just physically can't. Lo uchal od latzet v'lavo. It's just it's simus for me to imagine going outside today in this weather. Imagine facing the ice and the snow. Moses didn't have ice and snow, but just imagine the elements. It's outside, the curb, the uneven pavement, the car to get in, to get out, to sit, the seatbelt. Oh my God, I'm not going anywhere. That's where Moses is, okay? And then, moreover, the Lord has said to me, you shall not go across yonder Jordan. So in a way, Moses here is in Oliver Sacks' space. Right, he knows that he has very little time left. Now here's where it gets really interesting. Okay.
What page are you?
Now I'm on page. I'm going to just read one more thing. The Lord. Okay, so then the Lord your God Himself will cross over before you, and He Himself will wipe out those nations from your path, and you shall dispossess them. And then this is the word the sentence I want to dwell on. Joshua is the one who shall cross before you, as the Lord has spoken. So I want to ask, so Moses is 120, he's limited, he can't go out, he can't come in, and he knows that he's not going to cross the river, but he knows Joshua is. And my question is, how does that make Moses feel? That the notion, that's kind of like Oliver Sacks, tagging the future. How does that make Moses feel that he can tag the future and Joshua is going to fulfill the job?
Yeah,
Dan?
so I think it makes him feel awful.
Awful.
Yeah, I think it does. I think because he's sad that he can no longer be the main functionary. Knowing everything is in good hands and being able to just move on in a certain way. Also knowing that he's not going to cross the Jordan, but I think there's a certain sadness to this. But I wanted to relate this to what Elisa said earlier. You said that, and I do agree that we should never be able to never move away from doing all we can and not detaching from the world as it is. But at the same time, God gave us Shabbat. God gave us a moment of rest. So detachment may be a good thing. And it's like, going fishing or going to the beach or whatever, just going and sitting and resting for a while and then getting our energy back. So that could be a good move for those of us that can do that. But I've found also that as I get older, I'm with you, Wes. It's like, oh, do I really want to go out? The dogs have to go out. It's 5 degrees out. I don't want to go out, but I have to. But the idea that we do need rejuvenation. But in this moment with Moshe, it's clear that I think that he's sad, but also simultaneously happy about that.
So then your
First of
read
all-
of Moses is that he feels awful, that he can actually see the guy, name the guy, Joshua, who's going to finish the job.
Right.
Are there other reads of Moses' interior
Yes,
life?
first of all, as long as you are able to do the Simchat Torah, open the ark, head down, that you do, you're in good shape. I see it a little different than you. I see it that, the author of the article, Sachs, saying, I know that because of this young doctor, the world is in good hands.
Good hands, yeah.
And Moses, I think he feels well about Joshua being the next leader. So in a way, you feel sad, but everybody knows that our time it's limited here on earth. And at some point, it's better to know that the one who is coming is really good and the world's in good hands rather than to think that not. So I think it's a mix of emotions, and in a way, it's proud of the next generation coming up.
Yeah, and in the best tradition of improv, you don't say no, you say yes. Like, you're both right. Yes, and right. I think Moses is carrying a fair amount of heartbreak that he's not going to be the one to go there, and he sees Joshua and can find some peace with it. I want to tag on something that you had said earlier in the week, Wes, which is, Moses says this in these 2 texts, but Moses doesn't actually do this, right? He doesn't go out or come in physically,
Right.
but he tells the whole story of our people. He continues to make a huge impact on lives, and all of us had the blessing of speaking with our incredible member Barbara Shapiro, who is homebound, and like so many of us during the pandemic, was really cut off from the world. She just turned 91, and we had a beautiful birthday call with her where she shared with us that, really until just this month, she's been actively involved in taking phone calls from people who have consumer issues and trying to help them solve problems. She couldn't go out or come in. She's stuck in her house, but she found a way for her impact, her legacy, her ability to still help the world to go out. And I think Moses did that too.
Yeah. So I want to just thank you, Michelle. I want to shine the light on this issue of,
Gloves, right?
Moses has this complex interior life at the moment because he knows his time is limited. He's not going to be able to finish the job, and yet he sees the future. He sees Joshua is going to finish the job, and the question then is, when you have complicated emotion, what, if anything, does the Torah say about watching Netflix? I mean this seriously. Like, what's the spiritual resonance of watching Netflix? Is watching Netflix legitimate renewal, or is watching Netflix not so legitimate escapism? And what's the Torah's point of view? So I want to bring 2 more texts here to enrich the conversation, which is that this is on page 6 of the handout. The Lord said to Moses, "You are soon to lie with your fathers." So it's like very soon, like you're going to die. And then this is always found me. I just find so much pathos here. What's God's message? This people will thereupon go astray after the alien gods in their midst in the land that they're about to enter. They will forsake me and break my covenant that I made with them. Then my anger will flare up against them, and I will abandon them and hide my countenance from them. They shall be ready prey, and many evils and troubles shall befall them. In other words, we have this fantasy, and I've seen this, not just a fantasy, I've seen this, and I know all of you have seen this, that when a person is on their deathbed, their family, and the family gathers around and says, we're good, you can go, everything is good, everything is okay. We're in such good shape. Our problems are solved. We're good. We've got this. We've got this. We've got this. Dad, you can go and you can slip away in peace. The people you love are good. Mom, you can slip away in peace. The people you love are good. And God does just the opposite to Moses. Moses, not only can you not get into the River Jordan, but by the way, your life work is really for naught, because when they get into the River Jordan, they're going to screw it up, and they're not going to listen to a word you said, and they're going to be exiled anyway, and by the way, you're about to die. Now, here is the final thing, though, that is just so powerful. So what does Moses do? He does not watch Netflix. And what does God want Moses to do? Not watch Virgin River Season 4. This is what God has him do. Verse 19 on page 7. Therefore write down this poem and teach it to the people of Israel. Put it in their mouths in order that this poem may be my witness against the people of Israel. That day Moses wrote down this poem and taught it to the Israelites. So Moses knows he's dying, and he knows his whole work, all this pathos, is for naught, and his response is not Virgin River. His response is not fishing. His response is not the beach. His response is, with his last energy, to write down a poem. By the way, Ha'azinu, which is the poem, super hard. He writes it, he teaches it, he preaches it. With his last energy, he's still trying. My question, how do you guys react to that? Is that accessible? Is that setting the bar too high? Do you have to be Moses to do that? Or can ordinary people aspire to do that? Elias?
Yeah, first of all, I have to thank Alisa not only for bringing the blankets, but also for bringing some lights into the text, the Oliver Sacks. To me, it didn't ring the bell that if he wants to detach from the world, why is he publishing this in the New York Times? In a way, he's a little bit like Moses. He's like, why do you need to publish this if you are really, really detaching from the world? So I see more a parallel in the stories of Moses and Oliver Sacks than differences between them. And by the way, we have to go to the Talmud to see if there is a discussion about watching either Netflix or Prime, because Prime has many good shows.
So does this suggest, though, that does this text, if we take it seriously, our dying leader, Moses, Moshe Rabbeinu, who is facing the hard news of his mortality and is facing the hard news that all of his efforts are not going to be crowned with success. Despite all the stuff he said, they're going to screw up and be exiled anyway. And his response is to keep on trying, literally until his energy leaves him. Is that a goal that we can aspire to? Should we aspire to? Does this kind of invalidate Netflix as an option?
It's got to be yes and, right? There are times when you have to unplug. Dan, you so beautifully bring up Shabbat, right? That's a piece of who we are and how you need to be. You have to unplug to recharge. And there is a piece of life for all of that. Sometimes it's unplug in order to recharge the future, in order to refocus on the things that you perhaps have let lie fallow as you've gone out in pursuit of what awaits in the outside world. I mean, I think in that deathbed moment, perhaps one of the most powerful examples here is I've spent my life going and, being a outside person, impacting the world and working for all of the future of the community. And now I'm going to unplug a little bit to focus on that which is close. And there's something quite beautiful about that. And, thank you. If you're watching this, thank you so much for sharing your story with us, because it's so profoundly inspiring that at 90 years old, you find another way to help someone else, correct? And turning 91, correct? And that I think is a model that's so important for each and every one of us. There's always something you can find to do, and it's perhaps not rage against the dying of the light, but instead, pass over your legacy against the dying of the light, and continue to invest in the things that matter in this world to make it as good as you can. Sometimes that means in your individual family to fill them with love. And sometimes that means to pick up the phone and help somebody. Barbara shared this amazing story of helping somebody get a refrigerator, a young mother who was moving into an apartment who didn't have a refrigerator in that home to put her groceries to feed her children. And Barbara was able to help make that happen in her home at 90 years old and now 91. Happy birthday.
Dan.
Yeah, I think the elephant in the room that we're skirting around is that the examples that we're using are people in their throes of either dying or just becoming much older. But the text, I think what we really want to focus in on is, in this pandemic period, the detachment of the 30s and 40s and 50s and even 60-year-olds. And so we're not really talking about that. And that,
Right.
I think that's where the main problem is. If people in their 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, et cetera, are detaching and ignoring, then
So,
this is where the trouble is.
Dan, great. So
Yeah.
let's pivot now actually to Dr. King, because it's Dr. King weekend. And Michelle, you were kind enough to inspire us to include I've Been to the Mountaintop, which is Dr. King's last speech. And I'm wondering if you could share some framing around that.
I mean, I find this speech, as so many have before me, so incredibly powerful, not only for its message and its continued fight. I mean, talk about a fight that he has here, and the way that he reflects that he nearly died, and he if he had sneezed, he would have
Right.
died, and there's just such powerful imagery about finding that in that moment you realize you still have more to do, and yet the most powerful thing about this message is literally the day before he's assassinated, and he couldn't have known that. He has this prophetic message. I may not get there with you, but I know you are going to continue. You're going to pick up this fight. And in that way, he really is a modern day Moses. He gives the people, the American people, a profound charge and a legacy, and he writes it down like Moses wrote it down for us. Keep marching, keep fighting, keep doing.
Could you read a selection or a passage that really speaks to you in Martin Luther King season of January 2022? A passage that just spoke to you.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I love the sneeze part, so I would take
Please.
that, but I'm not, because my absolute favorite part has to be his ending. I
Please.
mean, his ending is just extraordinarily
Please
glorious.
read it for us.
Well, no one can read this like Martin. This is a setup, Wes. Go hear
15.
15.
Go hear the Dr. Reverend Martin Luther King give this speech. It's glorious, the recording. Well, I don't know what will happen now. We've got some difficult days ahead, but it doesn't matter with me now, because I've been to the mountaintop, and I don't mind. Like anybody, I would like to live a long life. Longevity has its place, but I'm not concerned about that now. I just want to do God's will. And he's allowed me to go up to the mountain, and I've looked over, and I've seen the promised land. I may not get there with you, but I want you to know tonight that we as a people will get to the promised land. And I'm happy tonight. I'm not worried about anything. I'm not fearing any man. Mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord.
And then he's killed the next day.
Next day.
So, Michelle, that's so powerful. And I want to ask, if you're Moses, it connects, and if you're Dr. King, it's like he's like a Moses-like figure, and it's actually not an exaggeration to say that, and that's why he's got a whole monument in Washington, D.C. that's amazing. Here's my question. How do we bring this down from the mountaintop where Moses and Dr. King live to the rest of us who are just sapped and demoralized with year 3 of COVID? What's the message of this to those of us who are sapped and demoralized in year 3 of COVID?
I think for me, what's so powerful here is we've got some difficult days ahead. You know, he doesn't shy away from the fact that that this is hard. The world is profoundly, profoundly broken. And I mean, much of the speech focuses on all the ways in which the world is really, truly broken in ways that many people can't even see their way past. They can't find hope to imagine a different world. And he sort of says with his last breaths here, we have to continue to find that vision of what could be possible. And I think when we're demoralized, that's a really important charge for us, to keep looking inside ourselves, to continue to try to find that vision of what could be possible beyond the pain and brokenness that we're feeling now.
So can I ask you guys this question, which is, when you're demoralized, and if you are a human and you're actually living in January 22 with Omicron and all this other stuff and all the stuff we all know too well, it's impossible not to become demoralized. Only if you're dead are you not demoralized. If you're living, you have to be demoralized in this at times such as this. So the question is not, do you get demoralized? The question is, when you get demoralized, what allows you to bounce back from that space so that you don't just numb yourself with binge watching Netflix? What allows you to bounce back from that space so that it becomes for you like a Shabbat and you come recharged and renewed? What's your move? What's your move to get recharged and renewed?
So, thank you for all this. Just to do a small parallelism, it reminds me so much of, Yitzhak Rabin, that he gets shot with Shir LaShalom in his pocket, aiming for peace, fighting for peace until his last breath. I watch Netflix, and I'm serious about this. When I get depressed, I watch Netflix or any other TV show, and this has been a very difficult season for all of us, and I have to admit it. I'm not embarrassed to admit it, and we all know about, not only that politics can separate us from friends and family, but also the vision of COVID and everything with vaccination as well, and that has been difficult for me as well. I think that the five of us are very lucky because we have a fabulous job here, and we have that not only involves us. We are not coming to an office and sitting in the office. We interact with people, and last night, huge improvement from previous week. We had 28 people at Shabbat Alive. Last night we had 33. Anyways,
We're trending upwards.
But I don't know you, Michelle, but I felt great last night. I felt great. Those 33 people were so important to us. And thank you for coming. And when I get depressed and I watch Netflix, I said, that's it. Let's go to work, do something nice, be with people, bring spirituality, teach a student, do good.
Now, Laz, can I just double click here? Could you compare the emotional feeling of reaching 33 people last night to the emotional feeling of reaching 333 people in the days before the pandemic?
Yes. The first reaction, it's depressing. Okay, the first you come, sometimes we have more people on the stage than in the pews, among the musicians and all the singers and the people working in the tech. The first take is depressing. To me, I don't know, I think that it happens to all of you at some point as well, but I'm able always to connect with prayer. And sometimes we encounter people in our lives that they say something simple, but that sticks with us all the time. I had a teacher at JTS who told me, it doesn't matter how many people are in the pews. You daven, you're praying to God on behalf of the people. And if there are 10 people or 300, it's the same. You have to give 100% all the time. Mm-hmm. And I do that all the time. And I'm able to connect with the prayer and enjoy even if there are 10 people there.
Yeah, and can I just add to that? Because I think, when there were in the hundreds of people there, I think that was incredible, and it's filled with energy and joy. And I think we somewhat took that for granted, in the sense we just assumed that was the way it would always be. And now those 33 people, and I'm also mindful now in a different way that there are people joining us who we don't see. And that, sort of holding people in our hearts who are not in that space, but we are in that space sort of on their behalf, putting their prayers up towards heaven, and they're joining us from a distance, kind of fills you with a sense of mission that was different than before. And being able to see the energy and feel that connection is pretty amazing.
So let me
We want to go back to 300.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
But before we hear from Elise and Dan, could you talk, Elias, about how you think about today is Shabbat Shirah, and it's the day of song, and it's a day of song where it's -0 outside with the wind chill and Omicron. So it's a day of song in a sparsely attended sanctuary again. How do you think about the joy of song in this season? Elisa, you wanna?
No, I feel that is exactly connected to the thing that you said before, that you asked before. How do we see the possibility of recharging? How do we move forward? How do we get out of Netflix? This is one.
Okay.
There are
You're-
so
you're
many
saying-
reasons to celebrate that we are here together and alive.
Yeah. Elisa, what's your move?
So I don't feel like we're entitled to be demoralized. Like, I think demoralized is actually a position of privilege. If you're struggling, if you're fighting for your life, you don't have a chance to stop. Like, if you're drowning, you're not gonna, like, you fight, you're working, you're spending all of your energy. And so I feel like we're all in a privileged position of not having to fight for our basic needs. And I think that deadens our senses and deadens our sense of commitment and deadens our awareness of what's going on around us. And I really feel like all of these texts speak to, like, get yourself together and get out there, and whatever you're doing, whenever you're doing it, you have an obligation to be doing something. And whether that, in whatever sphere you are, it doesn't matter what your project is, it doesn't matter where you're helping, but you're not entitled to just sit on the couch and watch Netflix. It's not okay.
That doesn't mean
Ever?
that doesn't happen.
I think everyone has the capacity to make a difference. I think it's really important not to let ourselves off the hook.
I find that so interesting, just knowing you and how important affirming and supporting mental health is for people. So that strikes me as a particularly harsh message coming from a person that I've heard so many times say to people, it's okay for you to feel how you feel. Can you unpack that a little?
Yeah, I'm not saying, like, 500% of the time you have to be on. I'm not saying that you're not entitled to take care of yourself, but I am saying that none of us are entitled to not be contributing. And I actually believe that there's part of our mental health crises is that we all believe that we're alone in this world and that we don't help anybody else and that nobody else is going to help us. And it's very hard to erase that sense that, like, we're all alone and no one else is helping us, but we can very easily make it clear that we're helping lots of other people. And when you go out to help other people, that helps us. And it feels counterintuitive, but the more we spend alone on our own feeling demoralized, the less easy it is to get back out and get help and to make a difference that will change our own inner world.
Dan.
Thank you for that. And I think this, on the other side of that, there's an entire segment, at least of the American population, whose move is to not only disconnect, but to be unhelpful. A lot of people just say, Omicron is a fake. All of this stuff is not real, and we're just gonna be rebellious. It's like we crossed the Red Sea, and then 3 days later, we complain, and nothing was good. Nothing was good. So I think that the same thing is happening in much of this country. I can't really speak for the rest of the world, where the way that people are disconnecting is exactly the opposite. They're being not helpful. They're being difficult, and that they're not. They're watching Netflix and thinking that this is the real world, and just not engaging and being part of the solution, but being a major part of the problem. And I think that segment of the population has become, I think, an issue of disconnect in a way of being of not disillusionment, but the word I'm looking for has escaped me, but they're just not living in reality.
Mm. So where are we on the Shabbat of Dr. King's weekend? I would like to frame the problem this way. The texts that we have are texts of heroes who do heroic things. An ancient text of Moses who knows he's not going to cross the River Jordan, who knows that his speeches haven't been heard, who knows that Joshua's going to do it and then the people are going to get kicked out anyway, and his response is to write Ha'azino. Dr. King, who was stabbed, and if he sneezed he would die, and he doesn't sneeze, and with his last energy he preaches this amazing sermon about going to the mountaintop, and he hauntingly foreshadows what will happen the next day, which is he's assassinated. With his last energy, he's still exhorting. And then there's us in year 3 of the pandemic. We're just so far, far, far from that kind of heroism. And what do we do when we find ourselves sapped? And is the notion of detachment, which makes so much sense for Dr. Sachs, and who could begrudge him that? It makes so much sense for somebody who's at the end of their life to look inward and feel deeply good about the life they have lived. But how does that translate when we're not at the end of our life, when we're in the middle of our life, and we're just feeling sapped? And how do we put all this together? So I think what I have taken away from this conversation that is most helpful to me is the notion that we're entitled to moments of respite and moments of renewal. So even watching Virgin River Season 3, which is as insipid as it gets, is okay if it can recharge you. And the question that you just don't want to go down a rabbit hole of Netflix. You want whatever is your move, whether it's fishing or beach or Netflix, whatever it is, to recharge and renew, but to hold yourself accountable and to ask the people in your life who love you to hold you accountable to your own standards for wanting to do more. And it's particularly when the world feels so broken and is so broken that there's so much more to do. So my prayerful song on Shabbat Shira is that that we find things that renew us, that we're gentle and generous with ourselves when we need that renewal, that we're gentle and generous with ourselves when we feel demoralized, that we're gentle and generous with ourselves when we feel sapped, but we don't let it end there. That's just the beginning of a quest to renew and to get to work, because the world needs our energy. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.